My name is Jacinda. I'm a certified diabetes care and education specialist and a diplomat of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, just like my friend Christina. I work with people of all ages living with all forms of diabetes. And in fact, I work with anyone that's living with a condition that's related to dietary food intake. No financial disclosures. Again, for those who are not familiar with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, it is a medical society that believes Western disease is preventable and reversible for many people. It's rooted in a whole food plant-based diet, but also we have lifestyle prescriptions to help people with exercise, reducing risky substances like alcohol and smoking, the importance of healthy, positive relationships in our life, the importance of sleep. Sleep becomes more important than food and exercise combined, and stress management. Today, we're going to talk about an issue that doesn't die. Where do you get your protein? And we're going to talk about the differences of the package it comes in and how it impacts your health. And I'm sorry, mosquitoes just keep eating me since I've been sitting here. So anyway, currently we have over 500 million people globally living with diabetes. That number is projected to rise to 1.3 billion people by 2050. In the United States, we have 55% of the adult population is either living with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. And those who are living with diabetes, 2 out of every 3 people will die from heart disease. Those living with diabetes, 1 out of every 3 are impacted by kidney disease, but yet most of them will die from heart disease. 1 out of every 4 adults is living with what we call MAFL, that's fatty liver. It's 1 out of every 10 kids. And I would argue that this number is probably higher because fatty liver is the precursor to type 2 diabetes. Now, as Christina said a little bit ago, there she is, that high blood pressure is not a normal aging condition. It is a food-borne disease, and it is an independent risk factor for your risk of dying of all-cause mortality. By the age of 60, 60% of the adult population has high blood pressure. Now, the biggest concern and growing reason why we are living with more and more diabetes is obesity. 75% of the adult population is either overweight or obese. Currently, we are exceeding 42% of the adult population is clinically obese. And the number one reason is fiber deficiency. Our ancestors ate over 100 grams of fiber a day, and we are eating on average 15 grams of fiber. I have lost count how many people have told me they have reversed their diabetes, or practitioners who tell me they help patients reverse diabetes simply by avoiding eating carbohydrates. That is not diabetes reversal. True diabetes reversal happens when you don't have diabetes, meaning your A1C is under 6.5, you don't take any medications, no devices, but most importantly, it is when you can eat large amounts of carbohydrates, which is the body's primary fuel, and have a normal glucose and a normal insulin response. It is not when you avoid eating them. So it's important to understand what insulin resistance is. First, your primary fuel for your body is sugar. It is glucose. And so sugar, as Christina pointed out earlier, that, it's a myth. We're told that sugar causes diabetes. How many people here think that sugar is what causes type 2 diabetes? Most of us do. Even medical students who I speak to think that actual sugar causes diabetes. But it's actually dietary fat and protein, animal protein specifically, because animal protein is very high in saturated fat. So when we eat a diet high in fat, which is the standard American diet, fat begins to accumulate in tissue where it does not belong, and it starts in the liver. That's why fatty liver is the precursor to type 2 diabetes. Then it begins to store in your muscle. Then it stores in your pancreas, and it interferes with the beta cells being able to produce insulin. This excess dietary fat messes with your mitochondria and initiates chronic low-grade inflammation. It is the perfect storm. And because our foods, so many of the foods we eat are ultra-processed foods, these foods dump sugars into our system rapidly. We have excess dietary fat that then blocks the insulin receptor and it traps sugar in our blood. High blood sugars are only the symptom. They are not the cause of type 2 diabetes. And when we trap sugar in our blood, sugar is your primary fuel. Your liver is always making sugar. 1 to 2 grams of sugar in an hour if you're healthy, 5 to 6 grams of sugar an hour if you're living with type 2 diabetes. At night, it's even more. We're making 10 to 15 grams of sugar an hour. So when the sugar can't get in, the liver starts producing more and more sugar. And when it produces more sugar, your pancreas starts knocking out more and more insulin. Now, insulin is not the bad guy, a very important hormone. This protein is needed for metabolism, but when you make more of it than you need, it's a growth hormone and you begin to gain weight. Again, 75% of the food in our grocery stores is ultra-processed food. We eat food-like substances, and over 60% of our calories come from ultra-processed food. No fiber, sugar dumps into our system really fast, no fiber to slow it down, and then we eat a large amount of animal protein. The amount of whole foods that we eat, we only eat 6% of whole intact plant foods. The rest of it is, yes, French fries and ketchup. So today we're going to talk about some protein myths and how eating protein is actually causing the obesity epidemic along with our processed foods. So the myth that only animals are a source of protein, or that you need to combine your plant foods to get a complete protein, and how much protein you actually need to eat, and that eating protein builds muscle. I am so tired of this. How many people, when you go to the grocery store, actually select food on protein? Think about that. Now, I was speaking to medical students 2 weeks ago. Almost all of them raised their hand. They said when they're in the store, they're thinking about the food that has protein, and that's what they choose to eat. We now can get protein in water. Protein is actually causing the epidemic of diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and obesity, and now we find it everywhere. It used to be, this was the normal packaging. It never had protein on it, but now, it's a great source of protein, so you should eat it. So how much protein do we really need? Nitrogen studies were done, and it's determined that the most protein a healthy adult needs is 0.8 grams per kilogram. That's the most a healthy person needs. And in fact, the lowest amount we need is 0.37 grams per kilogram. Now, how many people in here would think that probably the person who needs the most protein is maybe the person who's the sickest? How about end-stage kidney disease, like dialysis? Who would agree that person probably needs more protein than you do? We should, because when they do dialysis, it actually takes the protein from their body. Does anyone have any idea what their protein requirements are? I know someone does, but she shouldn't speak right now. It's 1.2 grams per kilogram. And now you start hearing things like you need 1.5, you need 1.6, you need 2 grams. But excess protein actually causes obesity and disease, and we will talk more about that. Now, first, fun question. We have 4 kingdoms here: animals, plants, fungi, bacteria. Which one cannot make protein, the 9 essential amino acids? Which one? Someone say it. Animals cannot make essential amino acids. So the fact we try to eat animals for protein makes no sense. The original source of protein comes from plants. In fact, all plants, including your blueberries, contain all 20 amino acids, but they are different percentages. And it is very important. It actually protects us from disease. So legumes have less cysteine and methionine. These amino acids actually increase your risk for type 2 diabetes, cancer, dementia, heart disease, stroke, liver failure. Grains have a little bit less lysine. High amounts of lysine in your diet, you decrease calcium absorption and it drives kidney disease. In fact, stage 3 kidney disease is very easy to reverse on a plant-based diet. All kidney disease is related to food. So if you have type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure and you develop kidney disease, it is only driven by animal protein. Plant proteins actually reverse kidney disease. So again, we need to think about where do these myths come from? And a lot of them actually come from the meat industry. And the meat industry sometimes goes after like tempeh and tofu as well, trying to state that they're not healthy for us to consume. And then there's a lot of misinformation. And unfortunately, this is information that will not die. If more protein was good for us, and if more protein built muscle, what builds muscle is resistance training and working out. Eating more protein does not build muscle. The United States eats more protein than almost any industrialized country in the world, and almost any country in the world. And our plant protein is some of the lowest. And we are the fattest industrialized country in the world. And you're going to learn in a second why, because extra protein does not build muscle. The average American consumes 222 pounds of protein a day. That is eating an average sized man and a small child every year. We saw this a second ago. There's an important aspect to understand the difference between plant and animal protein. Animal protein is very caloric dense. You have 5 stomachs, all 500 calories. If we are eating processed food and animal protein, we are the stomachs to the right. They don't even hit stretch receptors at 500 calories. So animal protein and our medications, as we heard earlier, yes, statins cause type 2 diabetes. In fact, Pfizer knew this. They launched Lipitor in 1997, and they knew it, and they manipulated data and hid it. They weren't sued until 2017. Repatha also causes diabetes. If someone is on beta blockers, it's almost impossible to also reverse their diabetes. And these GLP-1s, you lose roughly 40% of your muscle mass. And what do they tell you to do? Eat more protein. We're going to learn why that's a problem. Not only does more protein cause type 2 diabetes, but it won't help with your muscle mass. So it's important we understand our fuels and how we store them. So we're going to talk about carbs, fat, and protein. Carbohydrates, the sugar from that, is your primary fuel. Your brain can't function without it. You can't make red blood cells. Again, it's why your liver's constantly making it. But you have limited storage for this primary fuel. You store 500, 600 grams of protein, carbohydrates. Athletes can store up to 1,000 if they're very well trained. It gives us roughly 24 to 48 hours worth of energy. And your liver is constantly filling up the tap with it. Fat? Anyone have any idea how much fat we can store? Unlimited. Unlimited. The late Dr. McDougall said, the fat you eat is the fat you store. We have unlimited storage for fat. Now, this is going to become really important. This is our secondary fuel. When we don't have sugar, this kicks in as secondary fuel. It's not meant to be primary. Protein. Who thinks it's a fuel? Anyone? Everyone probably does because we're always trying to eat it. Protein's not fuel. We have zero storage for protein. Protein is for structure, very important, but eating it does not build muscle. You need to work out to build muscle. And when we eat protein, we can only utilize about 25 grams of protein when we eat, your liver will break it down and put it into the correct protein you need at that time. It will not use the protein that you actually consume. After 4 hours, what happens? You got to excrete it. If it is animal protein, this drives chronic kidney disease. If it's plant protein, it's much easier to excrete. Now, let's say it can't excrete all of it. And we have really high protein diets. So if you can't excrete it, what do you do with it? How much storage do we have for sugar? Do we have a lot? Nope, not very much. There's very little storage for sugar. How much fat can we store? So when we eat lots of protein and we don't use it, we store it as fat. And it is the reason why we are the fattest industrialized country in the world. It's also important to understand that our food choices don't just impact our own health, but it impacts our planet. There is no bigger driver of emissions and global warming than animal agriculture. Animal agriculture drives global warming greater than all modes of transportation put together. To bring 1 pound of beef to the table, that's 3 servings, 1,800 gallons of water. To bring 3 servings of beans to the table, 24 gallons of water. 80% of our land is for animal agriculture and to feed them. And it provides 20% of our calories. The number one missing nutrient is fiber. We consume not enough fiber to be healthy. It is less than 1% of children consume enough fiber from dietary guidelines for Americans, and I will argue that is still not enough. It is well below what our ancestors used to eat, and it is only 3% of adults. And why is it so important? Hippocrates knew. Who remembers studying a little bit about Hippocrates? 2,500 years ago, he said all disease begins in the gut. It does. And all health begins in the gut as well. I have worked with far too many patients over the last 30 years whose finely balanced ecosystem has tipped way too far towards disease. It's important to understand why fiber is so important. It wasn't until about 2006 that we really understood this, and now it is just a growing science. But we have over 100 trillion microbes that call us home. 70 trillion microbes live in our gut, and most of those are bacteria. They are fiber-loving bacteria. The healthy microbes inside of your gut that eat fiber up and down regulate gene expression. They regulate your weight independent of your food intake. They regulate blood sugars by 4 different pathways. They regulate your lipids. They make almost all of our neurotransmitters, like serotonin, that happy transmitter. 95% is actually made by a microbe, and it's taken up by the vagus nerve. Should we be shocked why we have such high rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide? We're not feeding our invisible allies that make us healthy. Low carbohydrate diets starve to death these beneficial bacteria. They starve them to death. Our food choices can bring our gut into balance. And the food we choose to eat either grows health-promoting microbes or harmful ones. Another fun fact is that blood levels of vegans actually have higher protein levels. Why? A plant-based gut actually recycles protein inside of the gut. An omnivore or carnivore gut is incapable of doing this. So let's talk about some different proteins and why they're so dangerous. So as a diabetes educator and someone who specialized with those living with type 1 diabetes, nothing raises insulin resistance faster than consuming eggs. 1 egg a day increases your risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 60%. Why? There's no fiber. They're almost all fat. They're up to 66% of their calories come from fat. 1 egg contains 200 milligrams of cholesterol. That's more than you find in a McDonald's Big Mac. We know they raise total cholesterol, LDL, and your A1C. Consuming them increases your risk, of course, for type 2 diabetes, our number 1 killer, heart disease, cancer, dementia, and all-cause mortality. For a man, eating 2.5 eggs a week increases his risk for prostate cancer. It's important to note that any studies that show positive health benefits from eggs are funded by the egg industry. Dairy does not do a body good. It is the leading source for most people for saturated fat. Saturated fat is what causes type 2 diabetes. Early exposure to dairy is linked to the development of type 1 diabetes. Dairy causes insulin resistance, increases IGF-1 from your liver, which makes cancer start and metastasize. And when people say that it's good for your bones, dairy makes the body a little acidic. Our blood is a little alkaline. And to neutralize those acids, you will pull calcium from your bones. Fish. Fish. People who want to continue to consume fish. First of all, I used to be boots on the ground for Sea Shepherd. Our oceans are dying. They're expected to be dead by 2048, and our oceans provide most of our oxygen, about 70% of the oxygen we breathe. We've killed 40% of our phytoplankton since 1950. It's a matter of time. If we don't change how we're overfishing, we can live, humans can continue to live and have no land left, but we cannot live with a dead ocean. So fish, no matter where your fish comes from, it's mostly fat. It has no fiber, but it's because of the fat, it's lipophilic. It pulls in all the contaminants from the water. So no matter where the fish comes from, our poop makes it from rivers and streams into the ocean and feeds into all of our bodies of water. And fish will absorb everything that's in our poop. We are polypharmacy. So when you eat fish, you might eat someone's birth control pills, maybe their chemotherapy agents. How about heroin? Whatever the drug of choice is, you're consuming that. We're also consuming all of the runoff, whether from pig farms being dumped into lakes and rivers. And then DDT that was outlawed decades ago is still positive in fish. But more importantly, that we're finding now is that fish is one of the biggest sources for microplastics and nanoplastics. And we now know, and the hazard ratio for doctors in the room, we never see hazard ratios of 4.63. If your plaque in your carotid arteries contains nanoplastics or microplastics, you are significantly more likely to die from a heart attack or stroke. So for the vegans in the room, anyone knows Dr. Kim Williams? He is the past president of the American College of Life's Cardiology. He has a famous statement that he says there's two types of cardiologists, those who are vegan and those who have yet to read the data. In the last 2 years, because of this data coming out on microplastics in fish, he says there are 0 safe amounts of fish to consume. He said, in fact, not only should we not consume fish, we shouldn't consume anything, including sea vegetables, from the ocean because of the microplastics. Back to protein. All animal protein increases your risk for all chronic disease. It makes no sense if animal protein, beef, chicken, fish creates disease, how eating less of it improves your health. If something causes cancer or causes type 2 diabetes, eating less of it still causes disease. This is a huge analysis. Harvard researchers looked at 216,000 lives, followed for up to 36 years. We're able to conclude that animal protein is an independent risk factor for the development of type 2 diabetes. Every single serving of red meat increases your risk by 24%. Every single serving of processed meat increases your risk by 46%. But what I love about this study is that they showed us how to save lives. If you swap animal protein for plant protein like beans, you significantly reduce your risk. By swapping for red meat, you decrease your risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 30%. If you swap it for processed meat, you decrease your risk by 41%. Now, I have presented this data along with other case reports about what animal protein does for diabetes at the annual conference for diabetes care and education specialists. It was 500 plus people in the room. There were 5 conferences going on at the same time. But yet, I come back here to my local chapter, 5 women who were in the room listening to my presentation. We meet at another steak restaurant for our monthly meeting, and they won't stop eating animal protein. And I can guarantee you, if your provider does not live it, they are not going to teach you how to prevent diabetes or reverse it. So anyone seeing the consumer's report, I think it's very important that people don't think that you need to have supplements for your health. I talk to people all the time. If we needed supplements, whatever you believe in, God, Mother Nature, she would be growing it on trees for you. We do not need to be taking all these supplements, and they are not regulated. Protein powders, 2/3 of them contain lead that exceeds safety limits from Consumer Reports. We know all supplements, 50% of them contain contaminants that exceed safety limits. This is not where we find health. And also, if you take a plant protein powder, almost all the fiber has been stripped out of it. You want extra protein because maybe you're working out and lifting weights, then add some silken tofu or some white beans to your smoothie. Stop with the supplements. If we needed supplements, our cows, are they drinking protein drinks? Do they need a protein shake? They don't need protein shakes. We don't need protein shakes. And when it comes back to supplements, it is a very reductionistic way of thinking about things. When we take supplements, you can increase your risk of harm to your kidneys and to your liver. It can give you doses of vitamins and minerals that exceed what you can consume in a plant itself. So people who take zinc, they'll offset your copper. They'll compete for those receptor sites, and your copper is just as important as zinc is. An apple, guess what? An apple has protein, it has carbohydrates, it has fat, but it also has over 10,000 micro phytonutrients that all work synergistically together to give you health. You don't find this in supplements. I have yet to find someone who comes to me saying, Jacinda, I really need your help, but I'm so healthy because I'm taking all these supplements. No, but I have seen people with permanent liver damage due to supplements. What comes in your protein package is most important. Plants prevent and reverse all of the chronic health conditions of man-made diseases caused by diet that we see today. They're full of fiber, antioxidants, phytonutrients, vitamins, minerals. They contain 0 cholesterol. They're very low in saturated fat, and some have no saturated fat. Animal protein contains cholesterol. Again, we don't need to consume any cholesterol. Your liver makes all the cholesterol you need. They contain 0 fiber, our number 1 missing nutrient in our diet. As a review, eating protein does not build muscle. Exercise resistance training builds muscle. Plants are the original source of protein. They're not missing any protein. They all have all 20 amino acids. You know, special note here too, because before I went plant-based, one, I had lupus. I reversed lupus. My titers normalized after 12 months. I had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, always thin. I would have been that runner, people who are old enough to remember Dana Carvey, who had a quintuple bypass. That would have probably been me. I blamed my father and my grandmother for it. My dad had colon cancer. I had precancerous polyps by the time I was 40. The protein that we choose to put in our body is what creates these diseases, and how quickly the body can heal when you change the protein source. And protein, and I'm going to take questions here in just a moment. I have someone here in the back as well. And protein is not a fuel. It is for structure. And high animal protein is the driver, and all of the medications that are coming along with it. First of all, we've had something like 50 safe and effective weight loss drugs that we have repurposed for another reason for weight loss, that have actually been removed for later realizing we're killing people. You wait and see what the long-term damage is with these GLP-1s. And of course, we need to connect not just with ourselves, but what we do to animals and our environment. Game changers for athletes here, or anyone who wants to make the best of however you choose to work out. Arnold Schwarzenegger is the producer of this, and the strongest man in the world is on here. But something very important, there's a urologist on here that talks about men's health. And there's a section where they show just within one meal what it does to a man's health overnight. My boys watched this and decided they'd share it with all their friends when they were younger. So I want to leave you with one simple and powerful statement, because we should not make eating complicated or difficult. We just need to keep our fiber up and our fat down. It is really that simple. Now, I know there's a couple people who have raised hands. I'm first going to start with the gentleman in the back.
So I've been hearing about white pea powder.
It is just another supplement. If you want peas in a shake, add peas to a shake.
Oh, I see. So that this time was put beans or peas or lentils into your smoothie or shake or something.
Yeah, I put white beans or I put silken tofu if I need something more in my shake. Hang on one second. I've got a gentleman.
So the pea powder, it comes right from peas, right? So
Okay, so I got a question for you. So we got to talk about processing. Can you find pea powder out in nature? No, it's still not natural. I don't understand, one, why you'd pay more. It's not a regulated industry. We find 50% of all supplements on the market contain a contaminant that exceeds safety limits. Yeah, so if you like peas, just add peas to your smoothie. We don't need to take it as a supplement. I'll come back to you in a moment.
Talk a little bit more about fiber, because it sounds like it's very important and we haven't heard much about it.
Yeah, that's a lot of what I was talking about at the end. See, missing nutrient is fiber. He wants to know more about fiber. I personally consume over 65 grams of fiber a day. My children were well over 100 grams of fiber a day because they were all athletes in high school, so they consume more. No one will have a fiber deficiency if they're 100% plant-based. Nobody. And being that most of our food is ultra-processed, which contains no fiber, and animal protein contains no fiber, we are severely deficient. Children born from 2000 on are not expected to live a longer life than their parents. Our telomeres are getting shorter. We need more fiber in our diet.
What about a fiber supplement?
That does not feed your gut microbiome. No, and I don't understand why we would buy a supplement instead of just buying an apple or a carrot from the grocery store. When we think about snacks, people are always, oh, you feed your kids with snacks, like little ones. I'm like, what's wrong with fruit? What's wrong with carrots or celery? Or my kids like eating squash and cauliflower and broccoli. We just need to eat real food.
And one more question related to that. The question of organic, the importance of organic with all of our fruits and vegetables.
It is important, but it's important that most people understand that all the ultra processed food is not organic. And also animals they take up 80% of our ag land, and we grow food that is not organic for them, and they're consuming that. So when people are still eating animal protein, they're like, oh, you're going to have to eat those fruits and vegetables organic. But you're already eating animals that are consuming food that are not organic. I choose organic as much as possible, but the truth is these are forever chemicals. They get taken back up in our atmosphere and it rains back down on everything. It's expected that children by 6 weeks old are peeing out Roundup. But anytime I can, I support all farms that are growing food organically as much as possible.
I support what you're saying. I arrived a little late. B12.
B12, yes. Okay, so there are two supplements that it's because they're not actual vitamins. So B12 is not a vitamin. When they were naming things, they thought they were vitamins, B1, B2, they went down, they got to B12. Later realized it's made from a bacteria. It used to be abundant in our soil. We had it in soil and water. And because of farming practice and sanitation, which is important, we've killed almost all of it. In endocrinology, I see people who are omnivores with low B12 levels. Now, B12 is really important for your central nervous system to make the myelin sheath that covers your nerves. It's essential to have it. Your first warning sign can be a fatal heart attack. So everyone needs B12, but we shouldn't take, I've met people who are taking way too much of it and their levels are very high. I do like levels between 600 and 1100. And then vitamin D, also not a vitamin. It is a prohormone. If you lived mostly outside and you didn't cover up and you didn't wear sunscreen and you rarely bathed because it takes the skin 48 hours to synthesize, you probably wouldn't need any vitamin D. But vitamin D is essential for health. Almost every cell in your body, except for red blood cells and 2 gut cells, have receptors for vitamin D. Insulin for diabetes reversal and prevention, insulin does not work well with low vitamin D levels. Your immune system does not work well with low vitamin D levels. I do have a couple of people who I work with who don't shower very much. A very good friend of mine who lives over in Europe, I remember this is 15 years ago, she told me I bathed too much and that wasn't healthy for me. And I just thought, gross. Of course, I shower once, maybe twice a day if I go for a run in the afternoon. But the truth is, we are showering too much, and our invisible allies are not just in our gut, they're all over our skin, they're in our mouth. We've identified 700 species in our mouth. But most people do need to take vitamin D because we're not outside and we shower too much. So those are the two I do recommend.
Yes, I have several questions. About supplements, the doctor told my husband creatine is good.
Nothing changes about what I'm saying. And in fact, it doesn't even change about vitamin D or B12. I end up recommending certain supplements just because the patients who've taken them for a long time, I see good numbers, they're vegan sources, but none of them, we can't trust anything. Nothing, there's no vitamin D out on the market that has like an A rating. So all supplements, and you should be able to get all of your nutrition from food, except for vitamin D and B12.
The other question, you talked with pasta or all the starches linked to diabetes type 2. What happens with people that genetically cholesterol problems? Like my husband, two of my kids have that. I'm talking about 400. And repata lower it down.
Oh, okay. So Jeanette, so I have my LP little a is very high. And like I said, by the time I was 38, I had high blood pressure and high cholesterol. I have optimal levels right now. And we know people with the most genetic risk, you can actually cut their risk in half by being plant-based. And even those who have higher levels are less likely to actually have events on a plant-based diet.
My husband is plant-based.
Yeah, and Repatha also elevates blood sugars. Yeah.
And the other question is, if you are in menopause, can you replace, we're talking about protein, grains to lentils or beans or tofu or tempeh when you get older, especially for women?
Yeah, so I am older, and I think I'm older than most people realize I am sitting up here. I've already been through menopause. Fun fact, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I averaged like body fat in the 30s. Now, I don't weigh any different, but I was like in the 30s for body fat, and I still worked out all the time. My body fat at 55 is 10%. I can lift heavier than I could before. All of my protein comes from plants. I don't really think too much about it, except the fact that I eat intact grains, and not eating intact grains is a risk factor for developing type 2 diabetes. I eat intact grains and I eat legumes daily. And if I don't have a lot to eat and I know I won't eat for a while, I do put beans or silken tofu into my smoothies if I can't actually sit down and consume a meal. But I don't think a lot about it. And if I miss it on one day, it's just not that big of a deal. So when it comes to menopausal symptoms, we know a plant-based diet, but more importantly, a low-fat plant-based diet actually significantly improves menopausal symptoms.
What do you think about oil?
I am not for oils. I think when someone is healthy, oils here and there don't negatively impact their health, but oils are very high in calories. And what causes type 2 diabetes? It is fat. So the more fat we consume, it raises your risk for disease. The woman in the back here? Okay, so ALA, if you want to talk about omegas and your essential fatty acids, first of all, only plants make essential fatty acids. Animals don't make them. So your ALA, you can get from leafy greens, and not only flax seeds or fish are heavily contaminated with microplastics. And fish don't make all of your omegas, they consume the seaweed and other things in the ocean. They are just the middleman. If you eat leafy greens, it contains all the ALA you need, and you have there's 6 conversions before you get to DHA. That's one of the best sources. And of course, in a lot of healthy diets, we consume flax seeds or chia seeds or some walnuts and what have you. But there is no safe amount of fish. Fish is all fat. It's no fiber. It does cause type 2 diabetes when consumed in excess, like any other fat does. But it's also loaded with microplastics, and we now know fish actually causes heart attacks and strokes because of those microplastics.
So then there's a couple of vendors here selling the sea moss, and they're saying to replace your vitamin for the sea moss.
I'm telling people not to consume vitamins. They should eat food for their vitamins. But now, yes, Dr. Kim Williams said we should be consuming nothing from the ocean. And I am against the DHA supplements. We do know that they increase the risk for cardiovascular events and arrhythmias. You miss the first couple of pathways of conversion after ALA. Again, it's another supplement, it's a big industry. The supplement industry makes a lot of money. And you had another question in the back?
I have two. One was about the sea moss. So you're recommending not doing the sea moss?
Yeah. And I trust Kim Williams a lot, and I was honored to actually take his place on a panel here recently at a medical conference. He says there's just nothing, because of the contamination of the oceans, we shouldn't be consuming anything from the oceans right now.
So where to get it?
No, you don't need, consuming collagen does not build collagen in your body. If it did, you could actually eat brain material and it would make your brain bigger. It's not how the body works like that. You eat a healthy diet, your body develops and makes the collagen you need. Yeah.
The B12 and the vitamin D. Is there a brand that you would recommend? Or?
Yeah, there's a Pure RX, which I order online. I like Sports Research for vitamin D3 and K2. You can actually buy it at Costco. Costco, they have the Bounty. You can get the B12 and stuff. It doesn't take much of the B12 for most people to optimize their levels with B12. Yeah. And I have time for one more question because we're going to have to bring in our speakers panel, but I'm still here. I am the speaker coordinator for the Tampa Bay Veg Fest. So
what can we do to clean up the oceans? I know that's a big question.
What we can do is we can stop fishing in the oceans. The biggest thing is it's overfishing. And most people who consume fish can afford fish, but most people who actually need to eat fish in third world countries, 4 calories to stay alive, can't find fish because of the fishing industry. And the fishing industry is run by criminals. There's enslavement out on the oceans, and you buy fish, you pay for that. And the people who need the fish, truly need the fish to stay alive, are starving because of it.
What was the organization that you said you were?
Sea Shepherd. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to have a panel. Thank you. And of course, you guys can find me. I see people virtually, but I do start pumps in person. If you need an insulin pump, I'm your gal.